Welcome to This Explainer. If you've ever watched the international news and wondered what truly drives the decisions of world leaders, you are in the exact right place. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating framework called liberal international relations theory, and we're going to break down exactly how domestic structures and society actually dictate global peace and conflict. Okay, let's dive right into this core mystery of global politics. It's something that has literally puzzled scholars for centuries. Why do some powerful nations stay at peace while weaker ones go to war? It's a question that completely challenges the old assumption that military might is all that matters. If it were just about who has the biggest army, the world would look very, very different. But the reality is much more nuanced. And to really grasp that nuance, we have to look inside the borders of these nations. So here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the liberal paradigm shift, cover core principles and institutions, explore 3 traditions of liberalism, look at the democratic peace theory, examine Lockean restraints on power, and finally discuss taking state preferences seriously. Section 1. The liberal paradigm shift, beyond capabilities and anarchy. Now, this is where things get really fascinating. For a long time, the dominant realist view basically treated states like identical billiard balls, just crashing into each other on this giant table of international anarchy. It was all about military capabilities and information. But liberal theory, it completely flips the script. It opens up those billiard balls. It says, hey, what's going on inside? The relationship between a government and its society is actually what determines how that state acts on the outside. So the crucial point we need to understand here is that state behavior is driven by domestic state preferences, not just military capabilities. It's really all about what a society actually wants, their underlying social purposes. For liberals, how these preferences are configured matters way more than who has the most weapons. Moving right along to Section 2, Core Principles and Institutions, the 4 pillars of liberal societies. If we look at the ideal version of liberalism, it's essentially an entire ecosystem resting on 4 interconnected pillars designed to protect individual freedom. First, citizens possess juridical equality and basic civic rights. Second, state sovereigns are representative legislatures based on actual voter consent. Third, the economy relies on private property rights. And fourth, economic decisions are market-driven by supply and demand rather than being controlled by the state. But underneath all of those institutions is this really beautiful foundational principle: moral freedom. This is the belief in the right to be treated and the duty to treat others as ethical subjects and not just as objects or means to an end. It's the profound idea that every single person matters inherently and isn't just a tool for the state to use. Section 3. 3 traditions of liberalism: Locke, Smith, and Kant. It's so cool to see how this thought progression builds step by step. In step 1, you have John Locke laying down the foundation of liberal individualism, basically arguing that state rights come directly from the basic individual rights of citizens. Then, step 2, Adam Smith brings in commercial liberalism. He suggests that free trade creates this natural pacifism, mostly because, war is pretty bad for business. Finally, step 3, Immanuel Kant introduces liberal republicanism, theorizing that republics, states that actually represent the people, will naturally seek peace with one another. Which brings us to Section 4, the democratic peace theory, the statistical reality of liberal states. Now this is a massive takeaway. The democratic peace theory is this strongly supported empirical claim that liberal constitutional democracies maintain a separate peace among themselves. The key word there is separate. It doesn't mean democracies are completely pacifist. They definitely still fight non-liberal states. But when they deal with fellow democracies, they just don't go to war with one another. They resolve things peacefully. And you can literally trace this phenomenon straight through history. Think about it. In 1795, Kant philosophizes that a republic is the ideal peaceful government. Flash forward to 1938, and Clarence Street notices modern liberal democracies actually are maintaining peace. Then, in 1972, Dean V. Babst finds hard statistical support for the hypothesis. For over a century, this was just an elegant theory, but as the data poured in, it turns out Kant hit the nail on the head. It's absolutely one of the most robust, mind-blowing findings in all of international relations. Let's pivot to Section 5, Lockean restraints on power, the fear of the state.
This is a point I think we can all relate to, right? Institutions must be established to restrain the inevitable abuse of concentrated state power. Because while liberalism is definitely optimistic about peace, it is incredibly skeptical of unchecked power. Classical liberals totally understood that a state powerful enough to protect your rights is also perfectly capable of taking them away.
And that core concern gives us what's called the Lockean tripod. Number 1, an emphasis on politics. Number 2, an emphasis on power. And number 3, the absolute imperative of institutional restraints on power. Power is going to be abused unless international and domestic institutions exist to hold it back. They aren't just utopian talking shops. They are practical, absolute necessities designed to keep society safe from raw state power. All right, Section 6. Taking state preferences seriously, the modern synthesis. I love how international relations scholar Andrew Moravcsik ties this all together. He points out that societal ideas, interests, and institutions influence state behavior by shaping state preferences. That is, the fundamental social purposes underlying the strategic calculations of governments. Basically, governments don't just calculate strategy in a vacuum. Their strategy entirely depends on what their society actually values at that exact moment, whether that's economic growth, expanding territory, or protecting human rights. I think the best way to picture this is with a car analogy. Realism focuses entirely on the car's engine, right? The state's military capabilities. But liberalism focuses on the driver's destination, the state's societal preferences. A powerful engine definitely determines how fast a car can go, but it's the driver's preferences that dictate exactly where that car is going to end up. Without knowing where the driver wants to go, just knowing the horsepower tells you absolutely nothing about its final destination. So, the ultimate takeaway from this whole explainer is exactly that. What states want fundamentally dictates how they behave on the global stage. Once you understand the underlying social, economic, and political forces shaping a nation internally, you've essentially got the master key to predicting their actions internationally. And I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. As domestic societies change rapidly today, what will be the new destination for our current international order? If domestic societies are driving global politics, what does our rapidly shifting domestic landscape actually mean for the future of world peace? The preferences of our drivers are changing, which means the whole trajectory of the global system is shifting right along with them. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, and I'll see you next time.